Long-term programming. This is a question that I get so often from coaches, and they want to know whether or not they should have something that spans out a longer length of time, whether it's 24 weeks, even 52 weeks. They want to know how much time there should be in terms of being able to build up a client over the course of that time. And I'm going to save you the suspense here. Number one, we know that clients' lives are variable. There are things that go up and down, there are ebbs and flows, there are changes that take place. And even under best case scenario, let's say you're working with an athlete and their only responsibility is to adhere to the training you're giving them, there is likely going to be things that pop up. So instead of having this rigid long-term plan, I would recommend that we have something less rigid, but have a plan in mind as far as methods that you're going to leverage during that length of time. So in this particular instance, I'm going to give you the example of 16 weeks. And within this 16-week time frame, we're going to be able to leverage different methods that strategically build up over time. And in this case, we're talking about building maximal strength. And within that framework, we're going to plug in methods across the time for both strength training and conditioning. So in this lesson, I'm going to talk about what that potentially looks like. I provided a template to you in the downloads, and you could take a look at that stuff as far as being able to actually look at it and then maybe implement it on your own. But this framework is going to give you a progression in mind to strategically build someone up over time, but also the ability to start looking at other things like their compliance. Are they able to complete all the sessions? Is it the right training split based on their availability? And as that stuff comes into, the window of information that you're getting from the people you're working with, you're going to be able to make those adjustments. But having a plan in mind in terms of how you're going to progress and potentially lead to a desired end state, maybe that's building to a 1 rep max in a squat or a press, that's going to something we could do very easily over the course of, say, 16 weeks. All right, so I'm going to give you the examples. I'm also going to show you the conditioning methods that I would potentially lean on, and I will give you some specific recommendations for that as well. But the long end of it is that we should have a plan, but the short end is that we should be flexible. We should be able to take feedback. We should be able to look at compliance scores and, of course, how they're responding. Going further, looking at things like heart rate variability and, of course, how they're feeling on a day-to-day basis, which, again, we know can change. And I will tell you, as someone that's written longer length plans, I've almost always thrown those plans in the trash because things change and the feedback that we're getting might dictate a different approach altogether. But not only that, programming is constantly evolving. So the programs I wrote a year ago are not even programs I would lean on today. I think that what we have present day is always better than what we had in the past. And it should be the case. Your programs should be consistently evolving. So let's talk about what this potentially looks like. And I think that this is a very, very important thing to plan, but to know that you might have to make some changes on the fly. You might have to throw the methods in the trash too. So keep that in mind. But having this functional conjugate framework allows you to plug and play very easily where it's not going to take hours upon hours. So let's talk about weeks 1 to 4. This is your first block of training. And the examples I provided you is where our strength methods consist of, we're going to lean on wave loading, and then dynamic effort and repeated effort. Now, these are going to be a staple in every block. This main method, however, will change. You're going to see how this culminates over the course of 16 weeks. But these two methods will change. Now, the delivery, the exercise selection, of course, will change. Every 4 weeks, I'm going to deliver new variations to the client. So the progression will be built in terms of, hey, we're going to new variations. Maybe we went up in terms of difficulty of a movement pattern. We might go from something like a split squat to a rear foot elevated split squat or a front foot elevated split squat, maybe even a barbell loaded. So there's lots of variability here, but know that for 4 weeks, we're going to use the same variations and we're going to progress those across 4 weeks by exposure, motor pattern improvement, obviously improving going up and load, progressive overload. As we know, again, we don't need to spend a whole lot of time hammering that because I think everyone knows what that means, but know that there might be some regression in terms of going down and load based on how someone is responding and what they're dealing with for stress outside of the gym. So wave loading is going to be our primary strength method for this first block of training. And in this case, we are going to leverage both the front squat and the floor press. Now, no, this is where you might prescribe something else. You might have someone that a different exercise would be a better fit for them. So I'm just giving you some concrete examples. Now, on the other end, we're going to leverage zone 2 and mixed modality conditioning. And this is going to be version 1 and version 1. Now, next block we're going to get into is weeks 5 to 8. Sorry, my writing is terrible, but we're going to do the same thing. However, now we're going to go to cluster sets, and we're going to utilize back squat and bench press, so our classic lifts. And again, that's an example, so it's not rigid. You can plug in whatever is a better fit for the person you're working with. And then for our dynamic effort, repeated effort, we're going to plug that in as well. And it's going to be new variations. In the download, I gave you examples of what you potentially lean on. Of course, we're going to have conditioning again, and it's going to be variation 2 of zone 2 and variation 2 of mixed modality. Now, let's say you have multiple days a week where you're doing zone 2, then you might have multiple variations of that. It might be delivered as far as time domain, where we're doing something for a designated amount of time, 30, 40, 50 minutes. It might be task domain where we're doing multiple rounds of something, and it might be different cyclical pieces or kind of just a different delivery altogether based on their equipment constraints. So this is our first 8 weeks of this 16-week block. And again, exercise selection will change. This first block might be a variation as far as our dynamic effort work. There might be 2 variations there, one for the upper body, one for the lower body, and then we might have the same thing here, but different variations, okay? So again, lower and upper, this could be box squat and a speed bench, and this could be a speed pull deadlift and a landmine rotation of press, just again, to give you kind of some baseline examples. So for weeks 9 through 12, we're gonna go back to those variations that we used in our first block of training. So our floor press and our front squat. However, now we're gonna use a different method. So just to backtrack, we went from wave loading, cluster sets. Now we're gonna go to sub-maximal, and we're going to use those same variations. So if you think about this, we've got exposure to those variations in the first block. Obviously, wave loading, a different method than sub-maximal effort method. However, because we've already done them, it creates some familiarity for people. So they're going to have a better idea of how to progress. And of course, they're going to have the confidence having had done those, a short period of time before they get into this block of training. So we've got our 2 variations for our main lifts, and then we've obviously got our dynamic effort and repeated effort and new variations for those as well, which again, I provided those to you, okay? So now we think about going into this final block of 16 weeks where potentially we're in a good place now to test some strength. And because we have tested back squat and bench press, and we use cluster sets for that, now we're gonna go into max effort method, and we're gonna go back to our back squat and bench press. And of course, if someone's not looking to build maximal strength, then obviously this might not be a method that you leverage. However, this is a great way to, number one, get buy-in, because we're gonna prove to them that they got better, and they will get better. If you do this right, they will get better. And how we're gonna do this actually is, we're gonna do week 1, we're gonna go a heavy 4, week 2, a heavy 3, week 3, a heavy 2, and then week 4 is gonna culminate with a heavy 1 or 1 RM. If they're feeling good, go for a 1 RM. So now we've built confidence. We went from already using the same variations in our second block. We're culminating this 4-week block, so 16 weeks of training with, again, those movements. So the confidence is there. They have familiarity. They're able to build. And of course, that is progression in and of itself. We're building intensity across these movement patterns, but we're doing it in a way where it's not monotonous, where we're doing the same thing over and over. And of course, once we get to here, this is exactly how I do it on my training subscription. I use these methods and I progress them in terms of what methods I'm using on specific blocks of training, with the end goal of getting to here. Now, it might be different variations from time to time. We might test other variations of the squat, and of course the deadlift would fit in there. But for my training programs, obviously Functional Conjugate, that's the framework that all of this information, all this programming in the course is set around. This is how we have a logical end date. Now, all of the things that come into play, conditioning methods, exercise selection, sets, reps, and rest intervals, that would be dictated by the individuals you're working with. The people I work with tend to be highly advanced. So obviously we have a lot of things that we know to be true with that. But with the people you're working with, there are things that you are going to know to be true. And of course, when you do onboarding and you bring on a new client, you get to learn all that great information. You get to learn their training history, their injury history, and obviously, what training styles they've had success with, what training styles do they not like. like. And of course, their ideal training schedule. All of these things come into play. But in and of itself, this is long-term programming. It's not writing the entire plan. It is having a goal in mind, a desired end state. Let's just say, hypothetically, the desired end state is not maximal strength. Let's say it's hypertrophy or it's just improving body composition. That is something that you can plug in. You might culminate with a method like the 6-12-12-25 method, where you have your fourth and final block of training where we're going a little bit higher intensity, and of course, a novel stimulus for individuals, especially if they haven't done that before. But over time, you could build some repetition with the movements that you plan on utilizing at that final block of training. So again, go back to the drawing board. If you want to plug this in for a beginner, easy to do. You want to plug this in for intermediate, easy to do. If you want to plug this in for endurance, easy to do. All that stuff is created within this framework. That is what the Functional Conjugate Programming Specialist certification is about. It's about having the framework to make the right decisions, to write programs that produce results long-term. This is the way you do it. So long-term programming, in a nutshell, is having that plan in mind in terms of methods that you're going to lean on for how long, for specific lengths of time, and then how you're going to potentially culminate 16 weeks of training with some type of test. You can get creative with that based on the individual and their ability. But this is a very simplistic example. This is one we actually just culminated 16 weeks of training in the Train Heroic app for all of my training subscriptions. And we just tested back squat and bench press. And we had people in their 50s hitting lifetime PRs. And it's honestly, I've been doing this for years. I've been using methods like this strategically built out for years. Now, in the past, I leaned on 3-week blocks. Now I'm leaning on 4-week blocks, which is even better. People are going to get even better results. So when I run this, again, this 16-week block of training, again, I guarantee people that hit lifetime PRs are going to hit even better PRs. So we have more time with the same movements. We've got more time to progress them. And of course, the exposure to those movements just builds the case for everything we're trying to do. So to summarize here, long-term planning, this is a great way to do it. I've given you the example. Structure your training that way. Make sure that you have a plan in mind in terms of if something doesn't work. So let's just say the client says, I can only do 2 days a week of training, and maybe they were currently doing 5 days. Then you need to know how to regress that plan and go with a different split altogether. Because this type of option where we have a lot of emphasis on strength development, that might not be the best fit for them as far as quality of fitness. We might need just more maintenance and longevity pieces to get them to where they need to go. But that is how you make the mark as an online coach. You don't give them a cookie cutter already created plan. You have the ability to customize quickly based on them. And this is how we do it.